It was Christmas morning, the kind that always carried warmth, family chatter, and the faint scent of cinnamon and pine. I had been running around, passing gifts, exchanging laughter, and teasing my siblings about the ridiculous socks and novelty mugs we'd gotten each other. Nothing had seemed out of the ordinary, until I saw the small, beautifully wrapped box sitting under the tree with my name on it. The wrapping was elegant, gold paper with a delicate ribbon, unlike any other gift that morning. I tore it open, my curiosity igniting before I even remembered to pause. Inside lay a small, sleek box, black with a mysterious shimmer. I opened it, expecting jewelry, a gadget, or perhaps some quirky trinket, but the contents made me freeze. A soft, floral-scented lotion, a delicate silk scarf, a pair of exquisite earrings, and then a note. It read, "For a new version of you, embrace her fully." I laughed nervously. A joke? Seriously? I muttered to myself. But the moment I touched the lotion, a strange warmth spread through my fingers, creeping up my arm, leaving a tingling sensation that made my skin feel alive in a way I couldn't describe. I shook my head, convinced it was some kind of prank, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was happening. The next moments blurred. My reflection in the living room mirror shifted subtly, softening, smoothing, changing. I froze, staring as my familiar features transformed, curves emerging where there had been none, my hair lengthening, my frame taking on an entirely different shape. Panic and disbelief collided with a strange, budding curiosity. I blinked, thinking my eyes must be playing tricks on me, but the changes were undeniable. My voice felt different too, softer, melodic, almost foreign to my own ears. I coughed nervously, listening to the unexpected sound, and a nervous laugh escaped. Light, feminine, unfamiliar. The room felt simultaneously normal and alien, each object suddenly disproportionate, each reflection an uncanny reminder of the transformation I was undergoing. By the time my family noticed, I was trying, and failing, to speak normally. My younger sister's eyes widened, her mouth forming an O of shock. My parents froze, disbelief mirrored in their expressions. What happened?" my father asked cautiously, stepping closer. I opened my mouth to answer but found the words trapped by the new, softer voice I barely recognized as mine. Panic surged. I fled to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at my reflection. There I was, unmistakably me yet not. The contours of my face were softer, my body delicate, every movement unfamiliar and new. The world seemed to tilt around me as I processed the reality. I was living as a woman now. Not temporarily. Not partially. Fully. Fear wrestled with fascination. I touched my hair, felt the smoothness of my skin, the curve of my body beneath clothes that no longer fit as they had before. Each sensation was intense, overwhelming, and yet there was a strange thrill in the impossibility of it. I was trapped in this new identity, a version of myself I had never imagined, and it all started with opening the wrong gift. The rest of the day was a blur of whispered questions, nervous laughter, and awkward attempts at normalcy. I tried to move, to speak, to interact as I had before, but every step reminded me of the reality I couldn't escape. Even sitting down felt different. Every gesture, every movement carried weight, awareness, and a subtle pressure I had never noticed before. By nightfall, I realized the depth of the challenge I was facing. This was no joke, no temporary illusion. I was living as a woman in the world, and I had to adapt. Fear, embarrassment, awe, and a strange exhilaration tangled in a knot that left me breathless, staring at the reflection that was simultaneously mine and entirely new. The morning after the transformation, the world felt foreign. Even the familiar, the creak of the floorboards, the scent of breakfast, the casual morning chatter of my family, seemed charged with new significance. Every glance, every sound, every movement reminded me that nothing was as it had been. I had been thrust into a life I didn't fully understand, inhabiting a body that reacted differently, felt differently, and commanded attention in ways I hadn't experienced before. Dressing was a challenge I had never anticipated. My wardrobe, once simple and functional, now felt alien. Tops that had fit perfectly before clung strangely, skirts hugged unfamiliar curves, and shoes, heels that I had only ever observed from a distance, pressed against my feet in ways both painful and intoxicating. Every choice became a study in adjustment, a test of patience, and an exercise in self-perception. Breakfast was a trial. My family watched me with wide-eyed curiosity, whispers under their breath barely concealed. My voice, softer and melodic, made even casual conversation a struggle. I stumbled over familiar words, the tone of my sentences shifting subtly, betraying the physical and emotional changes coursing through me. I could feel their eyes analyzing every gesture, every nuance. I was under a microscope both literally and metaphorically. Outside, the challenge intensified. Walking down the street, I noticed strangers glancing longer than they ever had, some with curiosity, some with amusement, some with barely concealed judgment. Every movement required careful calibration. How I walked, the sway of my hips, the tilt of my head, the subtle gestures that now carried meaning I had never consciously wielded before. Even mundane tasks like ordering coffee or passing through a store became exercises in poise, observation, and adaptation. At work, the difference was seismic. Colleagues who had always treated me casually now reacted with a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and subtle evaluation. Some avoided eye contact, unsure how to respond. Others whispered quietly, their tones carrying amusement or judgment. Every meeting, every email, every casual interaction became a negotiation with my own discomfort and the perception of others. I had to learn to navigate the balance between being myself and managing the new reactions my presence elicited. Friendships strained under the weight of this new reality. Friends who had known me intimately now hesitated, unsure how to interact. Casual jokes that had flowed effortlessly before were now fraught with uncertainty. Invitations to hang out became exercises in anxiety management. How would I be perceived? Would I be rejected or ridiculed? Could I maintain the bonds I valued without exposing the depth of my transformation? Despite the fear and tension, there were moments of startling fascination. Mirrors, once unremarkable, now held a hypnotic allure. I would catch glimpses of my reflection in shop windows, in polished tables, even in puddles, and study the contours of this new self. The softness of my features, the subtle sway of my body, the modulation of my voice, all became tools to explore, understand, and even appreciate the person I had become. I began keeping a private journal, a safe space to record the highs, the lows, and the nuances of my experience. I wrote about the embarrassment of public scrutiny, the thrill of a subtle compliment, the disorientation of familiar routines transformed into arenas of self-consciousness. Each entry helped me map my emotions, my responses, and the gradual shifts in how I perceived myself. Evenings were the hardest. After a full day of navigating new realities, the apartment felt both comforting and confining. I would sit, exhausted, reflecting on moments that had gone wrong and victories that felt small but meaningful. Every glance at my reflection reminded me that this was no temporary phase. It was a life I had to inhabit fully. And with that realization came both anxiety and a strange, burgeoning curiosity. What could I learn about myself in this new form? By the end of the week, I began noticing subtle changes in my own confidence. The sway of my walk, the modulation of my voice, the ability to respond to scrutiny without collapsing into panic, all became small victories. I wasn't fully comfortable, but I was learning. Each day was a test, each interaction a lesson, and each moment of observation a key to understanding this new existence. And beneath the anxiety and the struggle, a small spark of excitement began to grow. The world had shifted beneath my feet, but perhaps there was power in this transformation. Perhaps living as a woman, fully, consciously, intentionally, could reveal strengths, emotions, and perspectives I had never experienced. The fear hadn't gone, but it had become intertwined with possibility. And for the first time I began to wonder, could I truly embrace this new life? That night, once the apartment was quiet and the world outside seemed to fade, I finally allowed myself to breathe. During the day, I had moved cautiously, hyper-aware of every glance, every judgment, every subtle ripple in reactions. But now, alone, I could explore without restraint, without performance, without fear of discovery. Standing in front of the full-length mirror, I took in every detail of this new version of myself. My body, my face, my hair, they all looked impossibly delicate yet startlingly real. The curves I hadn't had before, the softness of my skin, the subtle arch of my brows, each element seemed to demand attention, not from anyone else but from me. I traced a finger along my cheek, feeling the warmth of my skin, the unfamiliar contour beneath my touch, and a shiver ran through me. Curiosity took over where fear had dominated before. I began with clothing. My wardrobe, which had seemed alien during the day, now called to me like a treasure chest waiting to be explored. I selected a flowing dress, silky and soft, and hesitated only for a moment before letting it slide over my body. The fabric clung in unexpected ways, shaping me, highlighting contours I had never considered, and as I moved in front of the mirror, the dress seemed to become part of me. I spun slowly, watching the way it flared and swayed, feeling an odd mix of embarrassment and exhilaration. Shoes became the next challenge. High heels, delicate and intimidating, pressed against my feet, forcing me to adjust every step. At first I stumbled, feeling clumsy and awkward. But gradually I learned the rhythm, the balance, the subtle shift of weight that transformed movement from tentative to confident. Each stride, each tiny step, became a lesson in poise and presence. I realized that walking, standing, even the way I held my hands, could convey subtle power, or vulnerability, depending on how I chose to move. Then came makeup, a completely new world. Brushes, powders, colors, and techniques that I had observed but never attempted now became tools of self-expression. I applied foundation, learning the subtle dance of coverage and light. Eyeshadow became a way to accentuate not just features but moods. Blush, lipstick, and mascara, all tiny adjustments with enormous psychological impact. Each brushstroke revealed something about myself I had never seen. A potential, a new form of beauty, and a capacity for transformation that felt almost magical. Voice was the hardest. Speaking aloud, even in privacy, felt strange. The melody, the softness, the subtle cadence. Every word sounded alien yet intimate. I practiced reading aloud, whispering, speaking with intention, testing the highs and lows, the flow and rhythm. I listened to my own voice, fascinated by the way it could shift perception, command attention, or convey subtle emotion. It was like discovering an entirely new instrument that belonged to me alone. Gestures, expressions, and posture soon became part of this private exploration. A tilt of the head, a flick of the wrist, a gentle curve of the fingers. Each subtle motion carried weight. I experimented endlessly, noting which movements felt natural, which conveyed confidence, and which drew attention to my vulnerability. In front of the mirror, I became both student and teacher, observing myself as though studying a rare and complex artwork. But self-discovery was not purely physical. Each experiment, each trial, uncovered emotional layers I had not anticipated. Embarrassment emerged, often unbidden, as I confronted the stark difference between who I had been and who I was becoming. Curiosity bubbled, mixing with delight, fascination, and a tentative thrill. Anxiety lingered, but alongside it I felt subtle currents of empowerment, an awareness that I was learning to inhabit a new space of possibility. I began to play with small personas, shifting expressions, tones, and styles. One moment I was playful, flirtatious, laughing softly at my own reflections. The next I was introspective, thoughtful, serious, watching how subtle shifts in posture and expression could completely alter perception. Each persona revealed hidden aspects of myself, strengths and vulnerabilities I hadn't known existed. Journaling became a ritual. I recorded every nuance, every sensation, every emotion. The embarrassment of initial discovery, the thrill of experimentation, the gradual acceptance of curves, voice, and movement, it all found a place on the page. Reading back, I realized that the private moments of exploration were not just preparation for the outside world. They were the foundation of a new self-awareness, a new identity slowly emerging from fear and curiosity. Hours passed unnoticed. The apartment, once just a home, had transformed into a laboratory of identity, a sanctuary where I could explore and refine without judgment. I learned patience, observation, and self-compassion. Every success, every tiny mastery, walking in heels, blending makeup perfectly, holding my voice steady, was a victory, reinforcing the possibility that this new life, while unexpected, could be navigated, shaped, and even embraced. By the end of the night, I collapsed onto the bed, exhausted yet exhilarated. My reflection in the mirror still shimmered softly under the lamplight, reminding me of the journey underway. I understood something vital. This hidden identity, once shocking and alien, had become a landscape of discovery, exploration, and potential empowerment. For the first time, I felt anticipation, not fear, for the world outside my apartment. I knew that stepping back into public life would challenge me again, that reactions, glances, and judgments would test my newfound skills. But now, armed with private understanding, practice, and a growing sense of self, I felt capable, ready to navigate, adapt, and maybe even flourish in this extraordinary, unexpected existence. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds, soft and inviting. I had rehearsed every movement, every glance, every subtle shift of posture in my apartment, and now it was time to face the outside world. I took a deep breath, smoothing my skirt and adjusting the blouse I had carefully chosen. For the first time since the transformation, I felt a flicker of daring excitement. The streets, which had felt intimidating, now called to me like a stage waiting for its actor. Stepping outside, the air hit differently. Every sound, the distant hum of traffic, the chatter of passers-by, the rhythmic click of my heels against the pavement, felt amplified like the world had been tuned to a higher frequency just for me. I walked with a new awareness, hips swaying subtly, posture refined from hours of private practice, and voice ready to project with soft confidence when needed. People noticed. Not in a threatening way, not overtly, but in the subtle ways that make someone feel both visible and present. Glances lingered a second too long, smiles came unexpectedly, and a few whispered comments reached my ears. I felt a rush, a heady mix of fear, exhilaration, and a curious sense of power. For the first time, I realized that living as a woman was not just about adaptation, it was about influence, perception, and presence. Cafe became my first testing ground. I ordered coffee, intentionally modulating my voice, letting my expression convey friendliness and ease. The barista smiled warmly, a genuine reaction that made my chest swell with a thrill I had never experienced. Every movement, the tilt of my head, the subtle laugh, the gentle placement of my hands, was a carefully calibrated dance, and it worked. Confidence began to settle into my bones, replacing a fraction of the anxiety that had gripped me before. I experimented further in public spaces. Parks, boutique shops, and even a library became arenas where I could test gestures, expressions, and interactions. Sometimes I allowed curiosity to guide me, striking up casual conversations with strangers, laughing softly, observing reactions. Other times I remained subtle, letting posture, movement, and expression speak. Every interaction was a lesson in social nuance, perception, and emotional control. The reactions were fascinating. Some smiled, some ignored me, some offered compliments, subtle or overt. I noticed the difference between attention that intimidated and attention that empowered. Slowly, I learned to recognize cues, modulate my responses, and project presence without overexertion. It was a delicate balance, but each success built confidence like a muscle, strengthening with every step, every glance, every small victory. Evenings were reflection time. After long hours of experimentation, I returned home, exhausted but exhilarated. I would study the day, replaying moments in my mind, the way a stranger's smile made me feel, the subtle thrill of walking past a group of people without fear, the confidence of responding naturally in conversation. Each moment reinforced the emerging truth. The outside world was no longer a threat. It was a canvas for self-expression, discovery, and even subtle empowerment. Social interactions, once a source of dread, became opportunities. I began to enjoy the challenge of reading people, adjusting behavior, and noticing how small gestures could shift outcomes. A compliment from a stranger, a friendly nod, or a smile became not just validation but data, tools to understand perception, presence, and influence. I was learning the language of subtle social mastery, and it thrilled me. Confidence grew incrementally. I experimented with slightly bolder choices. A brighter lipstick, a more form-fitting outfit, a more assertive tone in conversation. Each risk carried anxiety but also potential reward. And with each successful navigation of public spaces, the anxiety ebbed, replaced by empowerment. I realized that living as a woman did not just reshape how the world saw me, it reshaped how I saw myself. But empowerment was not without its challenges. There were moments of embarrassment, awkward missteps, and unexpected stares that reminded me of vulnerability. I stumbled over words, hesitated in conversation, or misjudged social cues. Each mistake was a test, a reminder that mastery required patience, resilience, and self-compassion. And each recovery, smiling through the stumble, correcting course gracefully, became a triumph, small but powerful. By the end of the week, something extraordinary had occurred. The fear that had defined the first days of my transformation had shifted into curiosity and delight. The anxiety that once held me captive had been tempered by skill, observation, and the subtle thrill of discovery. I had learned to inhabit my new identity fully, to navigate public spaces with awareness, and to find empowerment in every interaction. That night, alone in my apartment, I looked in the mirror and smiled. Not the tentative, fearful smile of the past, but a confident, self-assured expression that reflected the journey I had undertaken. The reflection staring back at me was entirely new yet undeniably me. I had crossed the boundary from fear to confidence, from uncertainty to mastery, from isolation to empowerment. And in that moment I understood the true gift of the transformation. It was not the body, the appearance, or the external identity. It was the discovery of courage, the expansion of curiosity, and the revelation of strength hidden beneath fear. I had opened the wrong gift, indeed, but in doing so I had discovered a life, a self, and a world I could never have imagined. I closed my eyes and exhaled, feeling the exhilaration, the satisfaction, and the quiet pride of accomplishment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new interactions, and new opportunities to explore. But tonight I allowed myself to simply be, to revel in the empowerment, the discovery, and the thrill of living fully, unapologetically as the woman I had become.